Welcome to the Chagos Islands. This tiny territory of 7 atolls and 60 islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean has caused a storm in British politics. The government has been accused of a shameful retreat and of risking British security abroad. But why has a set of islands 6,000 miles from Britain caused such upset? And what could it mean for other British territories abroad? Let's take a look. The first references to the islands can be found in Maldivian oral history, but their first recorded sighting by Europeans comes from 16th century Portuguese explorers. Now, the islands were not claimed by an empire until the French began settling the region in the 1770s. It was at this time that the first French colonisers arrived on the islands, with African slaves sent to farm coconuts. In 1786, Britain laid claim to the territory and its largest island, Diego Garcia. But it was not until 1814, when Britain defeated Napoleon, that the islands would be officially ceded to the British. At this point, the islands were being governed from nearby Mauritius, which had also become a British territory. Fast forward to 1965, and Britain purchases the islands from the independent colony of Mauritius for £3 million, creating the British Indian Ocean Territory, having agreed to make a military base for the US. This is because the location was deemed strategically advantageous during the Cold War. For the next decade, the British government forcefully removed the inhabitants of Diego Garcia to create this base. This deportation has since been widely condemned by international bodies, and many Chagosians have spent the time since trying to return to the islands. It was not until 1982 that Britain put forward £4 million to compensate Chagosians into a fund in Mauritius. In 2016, this was upped to $40 million for Chagosians living in the UK, but still offered them no return home. Meanwhile, several UN rulings criticised the UK's actions in Diego Garcia, and in 2019 called for the UK to hand back the islands to Mauritius as quickly as possible. The negotiations were not opened with Mauritius until 2022 and not finalised until September 2024, with Britain handing back control over the region in return for guarantee of the military base on Diego Garcia remaining open. For Chagosians trying to return home, this step is a victory.
Finally, England has admitted his past mistakes. Chagosian, we have been fighting and struggled for a long time. British government was not listening to the Chagosian people. And what saddened me about it is that most of our grandparents, families, they are not here to see this day.
The decision to return the islands has caused a massive fallout in the UK, mainly coming from the Conservative Party leadership candidates. Tom Tugendhat called the move a shameful retreat. Robert Jenrick accused the government of a dangerous capitulation. Kemi Badenoch said the decision put UK territory at risk. And James Cleverly called Labour weak. Their argument was that the decision possibly opened the door for greater Chinese influence in the region. But the UK's special envoy to the islands, Jonathan Powell, dismissed these claims and cited internal party politics as a reason for the upset.
I really do think this is a good deal. It was done quite quickly. It's quite detailed, but I think it's very good for security in the Indian Ocean and more widely, and that's why it's been welcomed by Joe Biden, by the US Defense Secretary, US Secretary of State, and by the Indian government just recently. So I think this notion that Tom Tugendhat has raised about a Chinese danger is actually nonsense. Anyone who knows anything about Mauritius knows that it is actually very close to India. It's a close ally of India, and is one of the only 2 countries in Africa that's not in the Belt and Road Initiative of China. So it's just a completely misplaced attack. I think this is much more to do with the Tory party leadership. They're trying to score points on James Cleverly, who started these negotiations.
Despite the Chagos Islands being relatively unknown until recently, the handing back of the islands has sparked concern around what it could mean for other contested British territories abroad. Indeed, just hours after the agreement was reached, Argentina called for the full sovereignty of the Falkland Islands. The country's Foreign Minister, Diana Mondino, said in a statement, "Following the path we've already taken, with concrete actions and not empty rhetoric, we will recover full sovereignty over our Malvinas Islands. The Malvinas were, are, and always will be Argentine." Falklands Governor Alison Blake also sought to reassure residents that Britain's commitment to the South Atlantic Territory was unwavering. She said the historical context of the 2 territories was very different. The history of the islands and the will of the populations could not be more different. But the return of the Chagos Islands and the subsequent backlash is a reminder of how precarious Britain's hold on territories abroad can become.